My first question is to Chris. And as the president of the U.S. Life Saving Association, you've seen a number of emergencies from coast to coast and in all kinds of environments. What can you summarize for us, which ideally needs to happen for race officials when that moment strikes?
I want to start by apologizing to the Boy Scouts. I'm thinking that there's parents out here who are thinking, with this Brewster guy running around, how's my kid going to get his aquatic safety merit badge? So I want to put this in some sort of context so that I can just clarify this. We're not suggesting that you shouldn't and can't use volunteers. There's plenty of places for volunteers to work, and some of that may be out on the course doing some of the work. The context that I made that comment in was, in particular, a search and rescue. Somebody's missing out of the water, and you need to have a team or people who are available and skilled to look for that person, but also from a rescue perspective and oversight and so on. So I just wanted to make it clear that it's not that volunteers are not useful. It's that your frontline safety people need to be people who have safety experience, knowledge, and whatever. And these other folks can certainly back them up. So anyway, you gave me this question in advance a couple of weeks ago, and I forgot to read it. So what is it again?
Well, at the moment that there's an emergency, at the moment a person raises their hand or there's some other accident, whether it's offshore or on land, what needs to happen?
Okay, well, here's my problem with the question. My problem with the question is that is the last or the wrong time to be wondering what to do. Lieutenant Buchanan and Ralph Goda were both talking about pre-planning for the events. Mr. Robinson talked about an emergency action plan. Those should all be in place so that everybody knows what their role is as soon as some sort of emergency arises. And there are different kinds of emergencies that could arise, right? Could be a small issue, which is a couple of swimmers are having some problem from hypothermia or the reverse or whatever it may be, and you've got to get a boat over there right away. There should be a radio system in place that immediately allows you to send the rescue boats over there to assist. It could be what Lieutenant Buchanan was talking about with massive numbers of people all of a sudden having this hypothermia problem at the same time. And I want to emphasize from a lifeguard's perspective, one of the things we worry the most about at the beach on any given day when we're making rescues one after another is that if the lifeguards who are involved focus too much on that rescue that's taking place, it means nobody's watching the other people. And so part of what you have to keep in mind is one emergency, two emergency, three emergencies out on the course. You can't allow them to distract you to the point that now the other swimmers aren't being observed. So the key is to have plans in place in advance, and I don't think it would be reasonable for me to try to get involved in every single one of them because there's just a million contingencies that you'd want to have anticipated in the first place. And a real key here is what's your worst case scenario and what are you going to do? So just to give you an idea, I talked earlier about the United States Life Saving Association. United States Life Saving Association. I should be able to pronounce that, but having a standard procedure for responding to a missing swimmer. I mean, we've got to do it. Sometimes it turns out to be a bogus, or misunderstanding. Somebody's missing, and we have standards as to what level of concern would rise to a search and rescue because that takes a lot of personnel. And I could go through the evolution of it, but it starts with a hasty search, and then it brings on people with scuba, it brings on boats, it brings on helicopters, the incident command system kicks in right away, and it's a checklist. Boom, 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 boom. And the reason we have a checklist is because we've learned in the after-action reviews that we miss stuff. Like, why didn't you call for that? Why didn't you bring the ambulance and have it stand by, hoping that you're going to be able to recover this person, instead of recovering the person, then calling the ambulance, and now it's a 10-minute response time? So those are the things, those are the kinds of pre-planning that you want to do. And you really do need to consider every possible outcome. And one of the main things you have to consider is, when do we shut this thing down? And how do we get these people out of the way? Because I can tell you right now, if you're doing a search and rescue for somebody who's missing in the water, the last thing you want is a bunch of people swimming around you. You want that area clear so that you can find that person who's missing. So anyway, hope that's on point.
Thank you very much. This question is for Mike and Bob. Bob is the founder of the RCP Tiburon Mile, and Mike is the safety director. It's right here in San Francisco Bay. It's only a mile swim, but it crosses some pretty stiff currents and cold water. The question to you is, what do you do every year, year by year? Do you review? How do you improve? You've been doing it for over 10 years now. If you could take us through the evolution of your safety protocols and plans.
Steve, thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for putting this conference together. This is so valuable, and I think the idea in the past is that race directors sometimes put their competitions together in their safety plan and they keep everything to themselves. And I think the idea of sharing is the best thing we can do for all of us, because if we don't share and something happens, there's an accident anywhere in the world, it impacts all of our races. And I think a gentleman spoke earlier, being an attorney, you don't want them controlling the race. We'd rather take this into our hands, do the best possible thing, share information, and prepare. Now, my preparation comes from over 40 years of open water swimming personally. I started when I was about 10 years old, and I swam in the Russian River. And I've done events, probably hundreds of events throughout the world, whether it be Maui or the La Jolla rough water swim, et cetera, and I've swum in the San Francisco Bay. And I've seen all kinds of different conditions. I've seen horror stories out there. And I know that really what it comes down to is preparation. And the better you can prepare, the better you're going to be. I'm an insurance broker. That's what I do for a living. So I'm always preparing for the worst and hoping for the best. So that's part of how I do things, how I do business, and how we run this race. Now, the most important thing of our race is we do the race in September or October, and we always want it to be on a Sunday morning at 9 o'clock. And that presents a few problems, right? Because tides change, and they're constantly changing. So what I look for, and we go through this with a number of people, is to find the right tide at that time of morning. So I have about 9 opportunities, Sunday mornings after Labor Day and before October 31st. And we choose the best tide. So that's the best way to do it. Now keep in mind, in the San Francisco Bay, looking out there, I can see the tides ripping right now. You have currents sometimes that approach 5 and 6 knots. And I don't care if you're the best swimmer in the world. You know, you can swim against a 5-knot current for about 20, 22 seconds, and then you're lost. I don't care who you are. So you need to be prepared for those conditions, and you don't want to put yourself in harm's way. So we look for a very slight ebb or a slight flood tide. So finding the tide is really important. The next thing that we do that's really important is we do a test swim. And we do a swim the day before because we can simulate the conditions as close as possible. The only thing that really changes tides in a major way is really the conditions of the weather. But we have a pretty good idea what's going to happen the next day if we do something the day before. So we do a test swim, and we get a lot of great reconnaissance out of that test swim. And the smart swimmers that come in internationally that do our race are the ones that are there that morning before, getting up early, getting that information, and they pass it on to some of their friends, and they keep the best information for themselves. But what we do is I try to disseminate that information to the competitors so they're prepared and know what to expect. The other thing I think that's really important here is afterwards, and I talked about this at the beginning, debriefing. We have a competition, it finishes, we're tired, we've been working on this for weeks, and the last thing you want to do after a race is to talk about the race. Sometimes you're exhausted, you're tired, you just want to eat, you want to have a drink, whatever it may be. And but we try to get everyone together in a room, and we spend an hour or two, sometimes with a couple of drinks, to really debrief on all the things that went wrong or could be better for next year. And you want to do that while it's fresh in everyone's mind. And if you can do that, I think you're better prepared for the next year. Our safety plan evolves year after year, and we try to keep getting better. Once again, I told you I share as much information as I can with other race directors, and I think that's really helpful for all of us in this room. And we're going to share, we have a safety plan, I'll share that as well. I think another important thing about preparation, and Mike Carr is going to talk a little bit about it, is kind of a division of labor. My role I wear a lot of hats, but my big role is to make sure that we have a safe race, that it's been promoted, that we have athletes attending that are having a good time, that leave with a great memory and want to come back next year. So we're trying to create an experience, and we're not going to have a great experience if it's unsafe. So that's the primary thing that we're looking for. Mike Carr has been with me ever since the very first race, and I can be sure we call him the Admiral, but he is watching all the swimmers carefully. He's got an assistant, Peter Winkler, who works with the Tiburon Fire Department. We have various safety crews out there making sure that the races run smoothly and safely. So I'm going to get a chance to introduce Mike Carr because I can focus on other things knowing that Mike is focusing on the safety of the event, making sure that the best thing happens for the swimmers. So this is Mike Carr.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, our race started with about 70 people, and we're up to over 800. So evolving our safety plan, there was no doubt our safety plan had to evolve. With about 70 people, we didn't need to have that many boats the first couple years, and now we have as many boats as we can get out there, and the way that we have evolved that to keep up with 800 swimmers, which is pretty much a straight shot from the island over to Tiburon, is that we kind of make a lane line. So we're in a, as Steve said, we're in a heavy-duty shipping channel, and there's a lot of commercial vehicles that go through there, whether it's the ferry system, there's several ferry boats, there's tour boats that go through there. So, of course, they're all alerted on the front end, but we have to be out of the water at a certain time because this is where they make their livelihood. So we really try and stay on time with everything. So I think like most of you, we have our non-prop boats in closer to the swimmers, and then we have our motor boats going on out. And one of the things that we've learned over the years also is the more swimmers we have, the more safety we have to have, the more larger boats that we have to have. So now we've evolved to having what we call stash boats. So we get these very large boats, whether they're sailboats or yachts, and they have hot showers on them. They have hot water on them. We give them blankets. We make sure that they've got space blankets. We make sure they have a radio. So those swimmers that we do pick up, we can put them on those stash boats. If they're non-medical, we can put them on those stash boats. The other piece that I wanted to talk about was, as we've evolved, we have more swimmers now. Fortunately for us, we are able to herd all of our swimmers onto 2 ferries. So they have to go through a gate. And as the swim has evolved, and we've had more people come out to swim for us who have less skill, which has been hit on several times today, is that we have a couple charities. We have Special Olympics and we have hospice. So we have people who, they drive by and they see there's Angel Island and there's Tiburon, and if I can just swim that, I can raise $100 to give to hospice or to Special Olympics. So we get those kind of people. So what I do with, as I'm doing all my work in the morning is I really try and walk through the crowd. I've learned that that's really important to walk through the crowd. Try and make eye contact with as many people who I think may be marginal. And then when they get on the ferries, it's like herding cattle. There's a gate they have to walk through, and I stand right in between the gates, and I watch them as they all get on. And then I'm on the ferry boat. I'm the first one off the ferry boat. And then when I'm on the boat, I'm actually walking around. We do our safety talk on the ferry boat because we have a captive audience. I get off the ferry, and I'm one of the first ones off the ferry. And again, I am just making eye contact with everybody. I'm listening. I'm looking for those people that you can tell are, going to be those problem children in the back of the pack. And I will approach them. And if I feel that, they are way too nervous to do this, then I'll ask them to get back on the ferry. So just evolving with the numbers that we've had, our numbers are so huge now. We've been successful. And I'm really glad we're successful because I think our causes are very worthy. But we've really had to change our safety plan to meet that. The other thing that we've come up with, because we're in a heavy shipping channel, is we have interceptor boats. So we station boats, several boats on the east side of the course and several on the west side. So the west is facing the Golden Gate Bridge and the east is facing the Delta. And so we have interceptor boats that if they see another boat coming through, they'll charge at that boat, that oncoming boat, to stop them. And also with our floating armada out there, it really looks like something's going on. But as you all know, you get those yahoos in those boats who, the bay's a big place, and I can do whatever I want out there. So let's see, make sure I didn't miss anything here. The other thing that, I think this is the last thing that we've come up with, because it is a straight line, is we keep our boats kind of in a leapfrog. So our safety craft, it's great having those stand-up paddle surfboards these days, because they're up above people, and we've got jet skis, but that we have the back of the pack leapfrog up to the front, so we're always having safety as the race moves forward. We don't really pay a whole lot of attention to the front runners, because there's so many photography boats and announcers up there. As everybody else has said, we're really paying attention to the people in the back.
I'm going to make one more brief comment, then I'll give the microphone back to Steve. I can't emphasize how important it is, and I said it before, to have a meeting after the event to really debrief. And one of the things that we say to everyone in that room, and we have 10, 15 people from all different aspects of the competition there, the leaders, is leave your egos at the door, okay? Because we have to be humble about this. We have the greatest of plans, we're setting high standards, but you know what, even with the highest of standards, things happen, and you need to be prepared for that. And we have to have everything covered that we think could happen, because in spite of that, things happen that you're not prepared for. So you want to have all of those things just tied down in advance so you can be prepared for the what if. So.
This next question is for Kate Alexander of the Flower Sea Swim in the Cayman Islands. But I want to preface this question with some information for all of you. To the best of my knowledge, there are 7 swims around the world that now have over 10,000 starters in the race. And I believe it was Chris who said, how do you manage a large group of people entering the water? When you have swims in Taiwan of 25,000, you have swims in South Africa of 16,000, you have swim in Sweden of over 10,000. The way they manage that is exactly how Chris said it. They have heats of 2,000 that are then broken up into smaller units. This is what most people do. Now, Kate's race in the Cayman Islands starts with 800 people lined up across the ocean. Now, they're lined up on the shoreline across. From a visual standpoint, it is beautiful. If any of you have been down the Cayman Island, you know how beautiful it is. And you see 800 people swimming down. It is absolutely gorgeous. But Kate, as a safety officer, has many, many things to consider. And I think I've observed the race, and they do it a very good job. And I'd just like you to share all of the different positions of everybody on the boat so others can learn. If you had an 800-person start, what do you do?
Thank you for that question, Stephen. And first of all, I want to say thanks to everyone for their candor this weekend. I really appreciate the hard lines that everybody is towing and the requirements that we're suggesting need to be made. Yes, I'm very nervous, and I wish I were standing at a microphone or a stand instead of shaking my hand. Let me stand up, that'll help. Experience, I imagined Stephen asking me the question, what's the most important thing to think about as a race director for safety? And what popped into my mind is experience, and it's not something you can go and buy at the marine supply store. But I've heard so many people say it here this weekend or allude to it in other ways. Our swim has grown up over, this year is going to be our 19th year, and it's learning on the job. It's knowing who your swimmers are. Fortunately, our population of swimmers, the characteristics have stayed pretty much the same, even though it's 800 people. But we have, I think, a unique profile of, out of 800 swimmers, 200 are swimmers, and the other 600 are actually non-swimmers, which is both good and bad. It means some of them are actually walking the course instead of swimming. We get to DQ a few people for that, but it makes our job a little bit easier because they're walking instead of swimming. Okay, how to answer the question of an 800-person start. we are able to do that. We have tossed around the issue of a staggered start, and we did do a staggered start one year. We split the males and the females. And then what you have is 2 400 swimmer races. Is that any better? It wasn't for us because we do hold our swim in a warm climate, and that leaves people out on the beach, and especially the safety people out on the kayaks are out there for longer on the water. And we do rely a lot on volunteers, including people who have maybe never done it for a big event like this before. So 800 people works for us because we have very shallow water. It's clear. It's point to point with sand, quite easy sand beach the entire way. People can get in anywhere, they can get out anywhere. We have 2 first aid tents at the 1/3 and the 2/3 mark, as well as a medical tent at the finish. We count everybody into the water, we count everybody out of the water, and I feel like I want to make an appeal. This is such an august crowd with experts at a level that we don't have in the Cayman Islands. And I want to make an appeal or be the representative for the casual swimmers. We're talking a lot about marathon level swims and elite athletes. And I feel like I'm playing t-ball with the majors at the World Series. You know, we're a casual swim. We do have some elite swimmers, but the thrust of our swim is casual swimmers. And to answer a different question, I'll work my way back around to the 800 swimmers. I think one of the most important things for setting up our safety plan is knowing who our swimmers are, is knowing your market. And we do have swimmers who can't swim. We do have people who swim in family groups. We also have families who will split up. And then they want to go back and finish with their child. That puts them back into the race, and we mark them as coming across the finish line twice. That's a safety issue for us. And I'm the safety coordinator for the Flowers Swim according to the second definition of the USLA definition of safety coordinator, which is I'm on the administrative side, and I go out and recruit the people who are actually doing the safety. So I have to balance the entire event, including the bagels are late and the ice didn't show up, with the safety and make sure they all meld. And I'll be rethinking that based on what I learned this weekend. Just lost my train of thought. So safety for us, safety for me as a coordinator of an event, not just a safety coordinator for a swim, is a big picture issue, which in Cayman is tents are part of our safety plan. We have to have tons of shade tents. We hold it in the afternoon. It's warm weather. We have a lot of non-swimmers, and we need to have tons and tons of shade tents. We need to have tons of food and beverage available. We have we allow people to get out of the water, rest, and go back in. So we have beach marshals that are part of our safety plan. And I'll just review basically our safety plan. We have beach marshals on the beach, watching from the beach. I'll add raised platforms to the plan next year. We have kayakers on the water, jet skiers and jet ski rescue stretchers, as well as our marine police boats, several other support boats. It's a very basic plan, but it's all informed by the experience of the volunteers who have been actually doing it longer than I've even lived there, and the local conditions. I think races have to be tailored to local conditions. Start with the minimum guidelines and add as you need to. Don't subtract, I don't think, but add whatever other elements you need. For us, that's a lot of beach marshals. And there we go. Thank you.
She missed a few interesting tidbits of safety that she does. When the athletes come into her race, they come into the registration tent. She has dozens of volunteers with suntan lotion on their head, and they're lathering up everybody. hours before the race, she's on the phone saying, hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. She has tents all over the place. So when you have a time to meet Kate face to face and without the microphone, just ask her about these tiny little details. It's a wonderful race. And my next question is to Dale. Dale's done everything in the sport. He was the oldest man to cross the Catalina Channel. He organized the Cross Catalina Channel race. He was on the first USA Swimming committees that wrote a bunch of documents. He actually preceded FINA getting into open water swimming, and he got the world professional organizations to corral and go under the umbrella. He was one of the first men who were there to say, hey, how do we get open water swimming in the Olympics? And my question to you, Dale, other than give us a 40-year history of exactly what's happened, you always claim that you are an administrator. You spend hours and hours and hours documenting things on paper. And why is that important, and how can it evolve?
I think in any major organization, you have the leaders, and they're the ones that are actually responsible for doing everything. But they usually have a staff of several hundreds of people or one or two that are administrators that help them do that job. That's what I always looked at my job as being, and I think it's very, very important that we do have those type of people to do the work and everything else. I started out as a Red Cross disaster worker, and I learned very, very soon that, first of all, I can't do everything alone. I have to delegate things, and the best way to delegate it is to have somebody else in charge and tell me what to do. I think most of my comments from here on out will probably be about Atlantic City swim and so on. Now, they were very, very fortunate to start out with a very good organization. In fact, it was one of the highest paid races in history up until the time that some of the Canadian races came about. One of the things that they sort of fell by the wayside is that they had a man come over as the meet director that eventually had to mortgage his own house to pay the prize money for the athletes, which I thought was a very noble thing to do. Most recently, well, we had very fortunate to have Sid Cassidy take over as the meet director, and he was also working in the emergency management office. That's where his office was set up. And I propose that everything that is done as far as planning and doing everything that has to be done to run, it's a team effort, and you phrase the thing, what did you say, John? Team effort, third party, everything is done. The meet director should not be the person that is writing the plan. Each element of that plan should be written by somebody else, and I propose that you try to hit the emergency management section within your community and let them write the plan for you. Tell them what you want to do, how you want to do it, and they're usually fairly cooperative as far as doing it. They also have the resources to. They supervise the beach patrols. They coordinate the emergency communications. So if you get the people there to at least start talking together and come together, let the people do the work, write that particular section of the plan. Then somebody can put the thing together, and you have your plan, and you're ready to go. And it's really quite easy on paper and to talk about. But when you try to get all these people to do all the jobs that they're supposed to, and for all the many, many years, what do we need a written plan for? Because that's something just people put it up on the top of the shelf, and nobody looks at. Well, if that's the case, you don't have a plan. You need a plan. You need a written plan explaining what every person does and how they do it. And here again, I go back to our friends in the life-saving business. They got to write the plan. They are the ones that make the decision as far as whether you hold the race or not. You notice in almost every manual that you pick up written by a swimmer or swimming documents, the referee is always the chief man in charge. He's the one that makes all the decisions. I suggest to you that that is not the case. It's the emergency management and the lifeguards and the rest of the people that are making the major decision as far as whether you hold that race or not. The other problem that we have is the cancellation, and when I talk about the plan proper, it's the cancellation of plan and the searching for missing people and so on that I did not cover at all in my plan. That's definitely got to be a part of that plan. We need so much to do. It's an ongoing type of plan, and you just can't do enough on it. I think that should pretty much do it.
Thank you much, Dale. And before we break for lunch, we've got 5 qualified people here, and I'd like you to actually have more opportunity to ask more questions than we had in the previous panel discussion. So if anybody has questions, yes?
Thank you. I come at this from the triathlete point of view, and as you know, triathlon is tremendously popular, and I think as with open water, we want to encourage participation. There's a line that we have to draw, however, between inviting everybody into these events and then keeping them safe and having people that are adequately qualified that are participating in the events. So I think that there's been some discussion of knowing who our athletes are at these events. I think it would be helpful to have the event directors not only imparting information to athletes, but encouraging, maybe providing training opportunities for the athletes to acquire a certain skill set to be able to participate in these events. Now, should it be a requirement? I don't know. But there's certainly more that can be done, I think, on the part of event directors to get their athletes qualified, more so than just conditioning, can you swim 5K or 10K? You know, do you have the skills that are required to manage in this particular environment? I think that would be helpful.
Was that a question? Okay, covered. Did anybody want to comment on that?
Yeah, that's a point well taken. You know, understanding your audience, and you know, I think John brought it up earlier about how he trains his team in Santa Barbara. They have to be at least 13 before they're able to do the competition. The Tiburon Mile, for example, you have to be 13 years of age or above. That's number one. If you want to do the competition, you're younger than 13. It's by special permission, and they can file with the race director. And I ask for a lot of different qualifications and background. Have you done open water swims? What's your background? Who's your coach? What are your times? Have you been in cold water before? And I actually have a conversation with either the coach or the parent about this before we allow them to participate. Now, one thing that's interesting about our race also, it's a fundraiser for Special Olympics, and we've had numerous Special Olympics athletes that I personally trained and other people have trained to participate, kids with Down syndrome, et cetera. And we have a list of qualification standards that they have to do in order to participate in the race. So I think that's really important to note, is to have some standards. And it's tough when you have a full spectrum of athletes and people you don't know in the race. But after a while, we know some of the athletes that should or should not be there. Mike and I were just talking about one. We've eliminated a couple of athletes and basically said we don't want them to participate in the race. And we actually had one swimmer, a gentleman, dress up as a woman and come back to the race the next year thinking he was going to get through. Mike was very vigilant on that at the checkpoint. We got him.
And he had a face I couldn't forget, and I was on the prowl for him because he had made it in. So I was walking the docks in the morning, and I was looking for him, and sure enough, he came in. He just was the ugliest woman you'd ever seen, right? Okay, sorry. But, I mean, there's just a wig, you know. It was just the ugly wig, the whole thing. And, you know, we just, you know, boy, you're not going anywhere. And yeah, and it turned out he was a little cuckoo, and he was combative, as a matter of fact, and we had to call the police, and the police had to take him away. But, yeah, some of you can relate to that probably.
So, having some qualification standards there I think is very important, and try to pay attention to that to take your question. But it's hard, once again, when you have 800 athletes. So whatever you can't pre-qualify up front, we try to visually watch, and you get some hints along the way. So hopefully that answers your question.
One of the things that we use in the lifeguarding world for risk assessment is go, no go. So we try to determine whether we can actually affect the rescue based on the conditions. And so there's, as you go through your little checklist, go means we're going to attempt the rescue, no go means it's too dangerous. One thing that I could suggest to this group, and especially with the being familiar with the triathlete crowd too, is some kind of evaluation on your website with respect to how they prepare for the event, and list it as a go, no go. Meaning, are you able to do this? And you can create your own benchmarks as far as their timing, but have you been in the ocean in the last week? Are you comfortable in this water temperature? And you can drive your clients to self-assessment, and then when you get into the day of, you can start to say, okay, we've all looked at our go, no go self-evaluation. Let me give you an update. And then from there, you can be building their critique mode to figure out, maybe this isn't my day. And then you can offer, depending upon how they come dressed up, they can offer to come back next year. So it's just a thought that one way that you guys can enhance the awareness among your participants.
Another a good reference point is NYC Swim, New York City Swim. On their website, they not only have the qualified pools, but also the qualifications and the coaches. So if you ever have any questions, nycswim.com is or .org is a very good choice.
We do almost the inverse of what you're suggesting, which is that the time limit for the 1 mile swim is 75 minutes. And that only means that they don't get into the random prize draw. So our unwritten rule is they don't get disqualified until they've been caught walking 3 times. Because we want it to be inclusive. We want them to learn to swim. We want them to enjoy the water. We want them to win the prize. And what I've learned as I've been more involved recently is what a benchmark the swim is for certain people every year. And as I said, some of them swim only once a year in this swim. And the first time they swam it, they walked. And the next year, they swam it. And the third year, they really wanted to be faster. And the ones who are coming in at 613 and are just so thrilled and holding up their card and waving at the crowd because they finished under 75 minutes. And you can do anything you want with your swim. All the conditions are so different, and all the people coming, I mean, swims do have their own personality, but you know who your swimmers are, and you can do anything with your swim to help the swimmers realize the goal, to encourage swimmers to participate, and to make it safe. So, bend the rules, think outside the box. We steal ideas from people all the time, reading about races around the world. And just make what works for your locale, and you can have it be safe and have non-swimmers included. We do have pretty ideal conditions, so it's easy to make it safe. That doesn't mean that something's not going to happen, but we want it to be inclusive, so we give them an easy trip to the finish line.
Speaking about stealing ideas, we have a list of everybody's email. We can distribute everybody's email to you. If you don't want your email distributed, please tell me, and we won't distribute your email to everybody.
My question is a comment in relation to triathlon and in addition to what the Tiburon Mile. In Perth, I work with 2 organisations. I'm on the committee for West Australian Swimming, Open Water Swimming Committee, and then I work with Triathlon Western Australia. And so for the open water swimming community, we have races from anywhere from 1 to 2 to 5 to 10 to 20 kilometres, and we have it open to all comers. They don't have to be an athlete of a certain level. the thing that we've noticed is from doing the survey after the first couple of years, as we've noticed the level of skill is going down as the participation level is going up. And so I suggested doing a survey or adding it to the entry form where, is this your first open water swimming event? It sounds like a real basic question, but it really gave us a gauge of how many were new to the event instead of walking around and saying to them, is this your first competition? And it might have been their first time from going from 1 kilometre to 2 kilometre. You're still asking that question, is this your first time in this event or this distance? So with the 20 kilometre swim in the marathon swim, you have to understand it's 20 kilometres. There's over 2,000 people swimming. Okay, you've got over 250 solo swimmers. You have over 400 duos, and then there's 500 teams of 4. So with all of that, there has to be a boat. So you might have 2,000 in the water, you've got 2,000 craft as well. So you've really got to understand, in understanding what Dale Petranech was also saying is, understanding what is your evacuation procedure. And your athletes, your coaches, your paddlers, your boat crew, everybody's got to know the plan, not just the committee, and know what the procedure, whether it's a shark sighting or a storm, you've got to know, what is the procedure. So with the 20 kilometre swim, we have a trial swim to qualify, which is 10 kilometre race. But they've got to have a paddler for that 10 kilometre race because they're duplicating the procedures when they're swimming the 20 kilometre. They have to, in the solos in particular, they have to have a paddler. But we found in our event recently where we had 450 entries, and the course was only 2.5k loop. Now, 450 entries might not sound much in the water, but you got 450 paddlers as well, and in a 2.5k loop. Fortunately enough, the cyclone came through and it cancelled the event. We didn't start. So I was more concerned about 450 with jellyfish, because the summer in Western Australia is just, we have a massive problem with jellyfish, as I've mentioned before, and it's not jellyfish, it's stingers. So I would have worried about 450 people getting out of the water and dealing with the stingers. So that's that area. The other area is with triathlon. I now do, with triathlons, they've put on the form about what level of competency they think they're at. So I'm now doing open water swimming clinics a month out, 2 weeks out from their events. I go down there because I'm passionate about open water swimming, as you gather, and you see the fear on their faces with triathletes. You hear it very common saying, if there was no open water swimming leg, wow, I'd be a great triathlete, That would be, you know what I'm saying? So, if you bring in people who are knowledgeable about open water swimming and educating these people, whether it's a 1K, whatever event it is, and giving them that opportunity, and a way that I've done it by donating my services, because I want people to enjoy the experience of open water. So what they do is they charge them $10, and the $10 goes to my foundation that I'm patron of, which is, a charity in Western Australia. And that way, I'm out there to share my knowledge freely and helping them, so that the greatest thing, seeing these women do their first ever triathlon, is coming up and saying, Shelley, the open water, I knew exactly what to do going around the turn buoy. And I also incorporated a buddy system. So they didn't think they were out there alone, and they looked for their buddy. Because, when you've got 500, 1,000 people in the water at once, as you were saying about the limited amount of eyes at what time and your degree of perception out there, I thought the buddy system was really good. In Australia, I was brought up to always have a buddy in the ocean. I never swam in the ocean. I still do not do that to this day. I still only swim in the ocean when I've got someone next to me. It's just, we have sharks, we have other things to worry about, bigger all the time in some of the waters I swim in. But, that's one of the things I've always held close to, the buddy system. And it instills confidence in each other when you're out there, you're not alone. So that's just some of my points of view. Just thought for those that are worried about skill levels, and the survey, it really worked in helping understand your swimmers.
Thank you. We have 2 more questions. This gentleman, by the way, if any of you are Olympic fans, at 2012 London Olympics, Martin here will be responsible for the safety on the Olympic course.
Thanks for that. Just a very quick question, both to the panel, well, to get your thoughts really, and anyone else in the room, is how technology can kind of assist us in looking after our athletes. And by that I mean, timing chips have come on leaps and bounds over the last few years in terms of running and cycling and whatnot. What I think, certainly in the UK, we're lacking is kind of affordable, reliable GPS tracking for swimming. And I just wonder if as a community that we can put pressure on companies that aren't necessarily developing this at the moment, or if they are developing it, making it so it's affordable, usable, and really so us as kind of lifeguarding professionals can use that as a tool if we are looking for missing swimmers, or just to assist us in actually the way that we manage water safety. I don't know if there are, as I say, in the UK we kind of put a lot of emphasis on swimmer tracking, but it's a very passive system. It's very much a case of we'll know at the end of a race that someone's missing, and actually can technology help us to know the minute that there is an issue or where people are at all times? I don't know. Just something to think about maybe.
That may be a question to anyone here. You want to answer? Yes.
I'm a race director in Seattle, and we have a point-to-point swim that's over 3 miles. And we use ham radio operators. And we put a ham radio operator in each boat, and they have a command center on the ground. And the ham radio operators are all volunteers, but they have their own, I'm not an expert on it, so I don't know all the rules, but they have very specific standards on reporting location and using GPS and sites to point and coordinates, and I don't even know how it all works, but they all talk to each other in certain code, and they have a command person on the ground that follows myself and another co-race director around, that they can give us the point on the first swimmer and the last swimmer and exactly how far apart they are and how far they're getting behind the last person. And it's been absolutely fabulous. It's entirely volunteer organization, but they are so precise and so professional, and they are using GPS, and they're professional radio handlers. And I just can't even begin to say how much safer I feel about my race since we started using them. And I hope that more people can involve those organizations, because they're all over the country and probably all over the world.
Martin, you actually brought a good point. If I can suggest to all race directors that you email me and Rob and others, who are your GPS transponder suppliers? We as a community actually don't have a global resource of who these suppliers are. And once we identify those suppliers, we can actually make a request on behalf of all our organizations to develop something new, not when that person goes down. And last question?
Yes, David Heller. I'm from Connecticut. And we run a open water swimming festival in a beautiful spring-fed lake, so we don't have a lot of the current issues and the waves, and no jellyfish, fortunately. Do have some turtles and snakes, but usually they don't bother the swimmers. And during the swim race, we run a 3-mile race, a 1.5-mile race, and a half-mile race all on the same day. And we have a number of boats out there and support staff, and but then we also have a training group that meets 3 days a week that we have 85 swimmers in, and we really have no safety out there. It's kind of interesting that we have this incredible safety for our actual competition, but for that morning swim that we do 3 days a week, we have one of the swimmers each morning has to get in a kayak. So I guess my question is for the lifeguard personnel, is there a particular recommendation? Would you like to see one lifeguard for every 12 swimmers, or is it by distance? We do a 3/4-mile swim over and 3/4-mile swim back. And are people looking more and more at the training? Because the competition, we're always out there with our staff, and we're always out there with our safety people, and we're timing people, and we're tracking people in and out. But it's really the open water training where the safety issues, I think, are really important, because you don't have that support out there. You don't have that organization. So I guess my question is there some kind of recommendations you can give us for number of lifeguards per swimmer, number of kayaks per swimmer? And I haven't had a chance to look at the USLA stuff online, but I intend to do that. So that's what we're looking for, a little feedback more about the training aspect of the lifeguarding. And also, we run a 12 and under open water swimming series in Connecticut, and I was just curious if there are any other areas of the country where you do some children's races. We do a 4-day Monday night series where we do first Mondays is just a free open water training clinic for 12 and under swimmers. They all do have to be registered with USA Swimming just for the liability purposes. And then we run a quarter-mile race on the second Monday, a relay race with 4 swimmers each swimming a quarter mile on the third Monday, and then last Monday they all do a half a mile. So I'm looking for, if there are any LSCs or people here that do the age group stuff, we'd love to hear from you too.
So on the age group stuff, please contact David Heller directly, and then we'll end this session before lunch with Chris.
I think there's 2 questions you asked me. One of them was a ratio issue, and the other was training versus an actual event. So maybe I just split those up and say that in terms of this ratio thing, it's been a really contentious issue in our community, in the life-saving community. What should the ratio be? And I cannot recall, but I think that the Los Angeles County lifeguards decided, maybe based on their experience in that triathlon, that actually they'd had some experiences before then, that the ratio should be, I believe, 10 to 1. Yeah, 10 to 1, sorry. I didn't hear what you said. But there's been a lot of pushback on their end about that. One of the issues that they've come to believe is that triathlon should be treated differently from open water swims, for a variety of reasons. But I mean, from my perspective, my experience with triathlons is essentially what was said earlier, which is you've got a bunch of people who are good runners, or maybe great runners and great bicyclists who can't swim worth a damn, and they're just hoping to survive the swim part of it. And so you end up with these really, really poor swimmers in the event, whereas I suspect that the kind of people that you're attracting here are people who are really a little bit more knowledgeable and capable. But then on the other hand, clearly as this becomes more and more popular, as was indicated earlier, there's probably going to be more and more people who are a problem or a challenge. I talked to Surf Lifesaving Australia about it, and they have a ratio too, and it varies based on the quality of the competitors, which I thought was interesting. And I don't know how they make that determination, but experienced, well, I think it's for experienced competitors, they have a different ratio from a fun swim or something like that. And I can't answer what that is. But, and so we do not recommend a specific ratio. And part of it is because of an inability on our end to come up with one that everybody was comfortable with, but I think part of it is also the reality that the needs are different on a different day and a different environment and so forth, and you really need to be able to adapt to that. Just the last point I think you made, and I agree with what you're saying, which is that, fine, you're going to do a great job, hopefully, of safeguarding these organized events, but what about all the, the training swims that are going on? And I don't know what the proper answer is to that question, to be honest with you, but what I would say is that you certainly don't want to have nobody when you're doing these swims. I mean, you want to have somebody there. The environment that you're telling me about, which is flat water environment, for us, what we would use in that case with 8, 10 swimmers who are swimming some distance or whatever is a rescue board, a surfboard, with somebody paddling it. Of course, you have to have somebody who knows how to paddle it, but the nice thing about the rescue board is it's not going to get tipped over like a kayak is, and it's a little bit easier to rescue somebody on it, but somebody needs to be able to know how to use it. So, I don't know. Do you have anything to add? Oh, sorry. Turn it over to somebody who knows more than me.
The other thing that I would suggest as far as your training session is course modification. You just have to swim in one place or another. Just one final remark here as far as communications go. Just want to comment on one of the English Channel swims back in the 30s, where they wanted to let a swimmer know exactly where they were. They hit the halfway mark with Sonny Laurie, who eventually became the chairman of the Channel Swimming Association. But at halfway mark, they let go with the carrier pigeons to get the message back of exactly where that swimmer was. So I think we made great progress, and I think we want to continue.